In Lesson 52, we'll learn about some more on addition of rational expressions, and then we'll also talk about what's called the overall average. Now in Part A, we'll be working more with rational expressions that have unequal denominators. Now you've been working on expressions like this with unequal denominators since Lesson 44. There'll just be one slight difference in these problems. They'll be just a little bit more complex. And look at this problem that I have on the board. Let's go ahead and do that one. Let's add those together. Now we see that we have a 3 there. We can always write that as a fraction to make everything look like a fraction by writing it over 1. And we see we don't have equal denominators, so we need a common denominator, and that would be c times m. So we could just write that over to the side. So now we need to multiply above and below on each of these terms as needed to get every denominator to be c times m. So that first one, we could multiply above and below by m. And so we say m times m. Now, what I would do, the difference here is that, look in the numerator there, you have a plus b. You have a sum in that numerator that you have to deal with. That's the difference between these problems and ones you have been doing previously. And I would put that sum, anytime you have a sum, whether it's in the numerator or denominator on these problems where you're adding the fractions together, put it in parentheses. That way, that'll help you remember to do the distributive property and multiply that m by the a and by the b. If you hadn't put parentheses there, you might have just thought, oh, well, I need to multiply m times b, and you would have forgotten about the a. So the parentheses help you keep organized and hopefully will help remind you to do the distributive property when the time comes to do that. So look at 3 now. We need a cm in the denominator there, so we multiply above and below by cm. And then the last term we need to multiply above and below by c. And so we use that rule where we can multiply above and below by the same non-zero quantity, and it doesn't change our value for our rational expression. It just changes the way it looks. Oftentimes that's called the numerator-denominator same quantity rule. Okay, so now let's go ahead and simplify this. We have cm as our denominator. And so that first expression on the left there, the numerator, will be a times m plus b times m, and then we'll have 3cm in the middle minus yc. And so that's our solution there to that addition problem. Let's do one more of these rational expression problems. Look at practice problem B. Now, we were just talking about in A that anytime you see a sum in these problems, go ahead and put it in parentheses. So let's just go ahead and do that right now. X plus y and then the A plus b. And now we see that we don't have common denominators here, so we need to get a common denominator. And putting that A plus b in parentheses helps you think of that as a factor now. It's just one factor. And so our common denominator is going to be A times a plus b. That's what we'll need to have for both denominators. And so what we need to do then is multiply the first term there by a over a. The second term by a plus b over a plus b. And so now we have a times a plus b as a denominator. We can expand that denominator out, or we can just leave it like it is. I'll go ahead and expand it, and so it would be a times a is a squared plus ab. And then in the numerator, on the left, we'll need to expand that, a times x plus a times y. And then on the right, we'll have minus 6y times a, so that'll be minus 6ay. And then we'll also have minus 6y times b, so that'll be minus 6by. And so that's our solution there. Just remember, on a problem like that, the negative stays with the 6. We think of it as adding algebraically, so we're actually saying plus a negative 6y over a. And so we take that negative 6y and do the distributive property like we did. Distribute it over the a plus b. Now we expanded that numerator out. Sometimes they may not expand the numerator or the denominator out, so you'll just kind of have to see what they do in the solutions manual. It's not wrong to expand it out like we've done here. So just be ready for that. Sometimes your answer is going to look a little different than the answer key or solutions manual. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. You just have to make sure you understand the steps that are involved to see if you did it correctly or not. Last part of this lesson is about overall average. Let's just learn about that by doing a practice problem. And this problem says that the average of the first 9 tests was 90. The average of the last 11 tests was 86. What was the overall average? So basically the overall average is the total average of a group of numbers. And so we wouldn't just say, well, the overall average is 90 plus 86 divided by 2, because that wouldn't be right. Remember how you calculate average. What I have written there, the average is the sum of the numbers over the number of numbers. So in this case we have 9 tests and then 11 tests. So we have 20 tests altogether. And so that's our number of numbers. That will be the number of numbers we use to calculate the overall average. Now what's the sum of those numbers? Well, if the average of the first 9 was 90, we can just multiply 90 times 9 to get the total of all of those tests. So that would be 810. And then the average of the last 11 tests was 86. And so we would just do 86 times 11 to get the total amount of scoring on all those 11 tests. And that would be 946. So we just add those two amounts together. And so that 810 plus 946 is the total of all 20 tests scores. And so that's going to equal 1,756 divided by 20. So that's our overall average. And so we just do 1,756 divided by 20, and we get 87.8. That's the overall average. So the overall average, it's not just the average of the two averages. We don't just do 90 plus 86 divided by 2. That would give us 88, which is not quite right. It's 87.8 is the overall average for this problem. You have to figure out the sum of all the numbers, and you do that by multiplying their individual average by that quantity that made up that average. You do those, you get the total of all the numbers, then divide it by how many numbers you have all together. And that gives you your overall average. Okay, well that's all for lesson 52.